I believe we are now live. I would like to call this special meeting of the Loveland Board of Education to order at 4:05 PM and ask Mr. Giuffre for a roll call.
Mr. Doherty?
Here.
Dr. Lorenz?
Here.
Ms. Pettit?
Here.
Dr. Schwetzner?
Here.
Mrs. Washington?
Mrs. Washburn is on her way, so she is not yet present. And Ms. Pettit is here under duress. She thought she had, no, she's not really under duress, but she thought she had completed her duty.
I was mistaken.
And if you have seen the agenda, it is a short one. There are a couple of special items that needed to be taken care of. So we would need a motion to adopt the special meeting agenda as presented.
I'll move.
Well, Ms. Pettit will move. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Dr. Swetchnow seconded. Any questions about the agenda? All right, then, Mr. Giuffre, can we vote?
Ms. Pettit?
Yes.
Dr. Schwetzner?
Yes.
Dr. Lorenz?
Yes.
Mr. Doherty?
Yes.
Motion carried. The first item is discussion topics. I've been trying to get all this together, but it seems a little harder to wrangle than a lot of things going on as far as the organizational meeting is concerned. And so all I wanted to do was alert everyone except Ms. Pettit to the fact that there will be an organizational meeting on January 4th. There will be a number of annual items that you should review to make sure you don't have questions about them. Not that there will be discussion prior to the meeting, but if you see something that concerns you or you have a question about it, make sure that you share it with Mr. Giuffre or Mr. Broadwater so that they are prepared to have efficient and a discussion about it on January 4th. You will see that some of these items also include an election of a president and a vice president, people volunteering for district committees such as facilities and finance. So you should be prepared for that. I know that Mr. Broadwater has sent out possible meeting dates, so you should have looked at those so that you're prepared to say that those meeting dates can be adopted at that meeting. One thing I will note is that we, I believe, agreed at our last meeting that we would not be discussing the Planning Commission as we might have, in other words, making sure that we have membership for the year, et cetera, because the Planning Commission will meet just a couple of days after our organizational meeting. And so we would not be prepared to have their input until after the organizational meeting. So that will at least be put off, discussion on the Planning Commission, until our regular January meeting or our February work session, depending on when we get the information and what we need to do. Anybody have any questions about the organization?
Yeah, Kathy, just one thing. We have fewer work sessions proposed
Yes.
than has been the case in the past. So maybe just a little bit of discussion around thinking on that.
Yeah, the work sessions, what we did, we selected every other month simply because the work sessions, what we have found in my short time here is there's, you have work sessions and you have the business meetings, and the business meetings is when we would like to approve the majority of the business of the district. The work sessions, we have not had the amount of items that I would say it was necessary to do it every month. If a work session is needed, it's easy enough to call one, but I think it's a lot of preparation to prepare for these, and we want to make sure we're making the best use of the time that we have. And Mr. Giuffre, I don't know if you have anything to add, but the work sessions, we want to make sure they're valuable. The
one point I'd probably make on it is I hope that this works, because I have no desire to spend all that additional time. But my experience so far is that we have needed every meeting that we've had, and sometimes then some.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe things will be different in January or February and going forward. I am a little concerned about starting the year off with a reduced number. It's easier to cancel them than it turns out to be to set them, because people put them down in their calendars, et cetera. So just a little more conversation about this, I would appreciate. I hear what you're saying.
Yeah, no, I'm open to discussion with the board and what you feel is appropriate. I know with the work session, normally you don't want to be approving things. It's that's what your business meeting's for. The work session is for good discussion, hearty discussion about direction. We're going to start the year off moving towards a strategic vision, and that's going to be a lot of the focus of what we do for the remainder of the year. And so I'm open to any discussion. We want to make sure we have the availability of time to do what we need to do with the work.
Well, maybe the suggestion, Mike, is for, let's see, we've got 2 meetings planned tentatively for January. We've got 1 for February, and we do have 2 for March. Given how much is going to be going on trying to get the year started off, I wonder if we ought to plan a February work session. Because as you say, presumably we'll be launching
Yes.
the planning process, and there'll be a host of other meetings attendant to that.
Sure. Yeah. If that's what the board would like me to do, I can get one scheduled in February. And to your point, it's a lot easier to cancel one than try and get one scheduled if it's not there.
So this is one member's input. I don't know where everybody else is.
I would suggest that you perhaps also look at what you think the strategic vision calendar might look like. And if there is a meeting or a session that the board would be asked to attend, not as just a board meeting, maybe we try to put that on the calendar in lieu of a workshop. We would not call to order. We would not call it a meeting. So check and see what you think that schedule will be, and then the board can.
Yeah. That's a good idea. And the goal is for the org meeting on January 4th to be able to bring a tentative schedule of what you're talking about. Hopefully we can do that over the holidays. It might be difficult, but it should coincide with what we're doing. That's going to be our main focus for the remainder of the year. So, yep. Idea.
Okay, so I'd be good with that. I don't know how everybody else, Eileen, you didn't maybe hear the conversation. We had just talked about the proposed calendar, not for consideration tonight, because we'll do it in the organizational meeting in January. But I had pointed out that we have fewer work sessions planned for next year than we've had this year. And we were just going back and forth about, at least my viewpoint would be that maybe put up a February, a February work meeting. And if we don't need it, we can cancel it. But there's a lot of things maybe to get the year started off that would benefit by having that on everybody's calendar versus trying to come up with a date after the fact.
Yeah, sure.
And then the other point was, I know there's a variety of things that we want to do on January 4th in the organizational meeting. Are we going to be sending something out soon on what all those various items are?
Public notice, yeah, it's part of that.
What I would like us to receive as a board is that list of the initial items that I had mentioned before, just that one big bulky item so that everybody can look at it. Those include things like membership in OSBA and those district committee memberships that I was talking about. So if we could get that in front of the board so they know what they're looking at, but then the agenda will go live the week before the meeting with any of the other items. I don't know when there's a draft agenda available on board docs for board members, but we could look into that as well.
Probably make it live right after the holiday in that last week of December. And it would also have the budget as well as any other document that would be part of that meeting. But
Yeah, I guess the only concern that I was feeling was when we talk about a lot of different things going on at that meeting, I'd love to have a sense of just how much, whether we can practically expect to get it all done.
It's
whether there's a
pretty
concern.
typical, and what I was speaking about, a lot of things, was that first list. I think you might recall in January that there was a list, and I believe you in particular, maybe Dr. Swetchnow as well, had questions about why do we have to do this? Why do we have to do that? And they are pretty typical. They are things that are legally required to organize the board. So there are a lot of things. They're not necessarily a ton of action items.
Yeah.
There are just a lot of things that you need to be aware of.
So if it's essentially the same items that we did last January, I'm not worried. It's the conversation that we've been having
Yes. No, it's essentially last year with actually a few omissions. Mr. Giuffre has found a few things that are redundant, not necessary to be on there. So it is essentially a regular organizational meeting. I just wanted board members to be aware, particularly of the dates, particularly of the possible volunteering to be a part of a committee so that you could think about it and be prepared to discuss rather than not knowing about it before you came on.
Okay.
That's all.
I'm good.
The last item I'd throw out is we have been working on kind of the rhythm of what the board meetings have been annually. So
The calendar.
January, February, I've almost got that complete, and I'll
Okay.
bring that, I'll present that as well before the board meeting so you can review it and see, that might give you an idea of what we would do in a work session as well.
Okay. Anything else? Then we'll move to these items. The first item is the Sims Township TIF extension. And I would ask for a motion to approve the Sims Township TIF extension, and then we'll have session.
So moved.
Mr. Doherty moved, and did I hear Mrs. Washburn
Yes.
second? Okay. And so what we have here is the reason for this special meeting. And I think there was a sense that since TIFs normally go without much school board input or much school board say, I think the feeling was, well, this is just going to happen. But it turns out that there is a requirement that we approve the TIF extension. This is a somewhat happier one than we've had before. You all may know that I have not necessarily felt that this particular Sims Township TIF considered Loveland taxpayers very well, Loveland school taxpayers. In other words, I believe that this TIF was created and then extended one time without much concern for the fact that Loveland taxpayers had voted for taxes to go to the schools, and the TIF was diverting those taxes to other uses in Sims Township. This extension is now required to make the school district whole. So while there's an extension of the taxes being diverted to Sims Township, none of the taxes that should come to the Loveland schools, based on what the voted millage is, none of those will be diverted. Those will come to the schools. So we will begin to receive the tax monies that have previously been diverted by the TIF. So to me, that's a better situation. Mr. Giuffre, did I explain it correctly?
Perfectly.
And so the only thing that I would add is why now are they asking us to agree to this?
So it was a 30-year TIF that expires at the end of this calendar year. Without this action, they would not be able to extend it for 15, which is the agreement, and to hold the district harmless at 100% of the tax revenue that would come to us, tax duplicate. And so we called the special meeting so that we can act upon it in time for them to be able to affect the extension to the TIF.
And then just to reiterate what Dr. Lorenz said, this is good news for the district as it recaptures taxes, which has historically been diverted away.
Yes.
And by us cooperating with Sims Township and the agreement, we get those refunded back to us.
Yes.
And for clarification, neither commercial, public utility, or residential taxpayers see a difference in their tax bill.
None.
For members of the public, this is a far more complicated topic than it seems like. I went to school on this during the last week or so. I had this naive viewpoint that it was something akin to a tax abatement, and it is nothing at all like a tax abatement. It's a unique form of public infrastructure financing that has all kinds of twists and turns and complications. And apparently the law has changed around school district involvement in these things since the inception of this particular TIF 30 years ago. So far too complicated for us, I think, to go into a lot of detailed explanation, but you can do a little bit of internet search and get some primers on this one. But the net is that this is good for us. It's good for effectively residential taxpayers because there's some revenue that comes to the district, not out of residential taxpayers' pockets.
And this is the Myers, this is the Walgreens and the Huntington Bank up on Field Turtle,
Right.
and the apartments behind it.
And it does take the cooperation of both the township and the Board of Education to come to a final agreement on this.
Brett Griffith made sure that the law was updated to include board participation to ensure that the board was more involved in the agreement. Yes.
So this should be a happy day between the township and the school district, I think.
The first happy day I've had concerning this TIF, I'll tell you, because there's been some lawsuits involved and things like that.
Right.
So this is,
So
It's a good
thank
thing.
you, Sims trustees. Past is the past, the future is now. So we move on,
So
right?
we start seeing that effective January 1st, correct?
Might be February, March, but yes, effective as the first.
effective.
The first dollar starts on January. We may receive
Yes.
it 5 months later, but
Yes.
the first, okay.
Correct.
Anything else? All right, Mr. Giuffre, can we vote on that?
Mr. Daugherty,
Yes.
Ms. Washburn,
Yes.
Ms. Pettit,
Yes.
Dr. Schwetchenow,
Yes.
and Dr. Lorenz.
Yes. Motion carried. The next two items are regular items, and I believe we moved these they have to do with the tax budget, but they are sort of normal items. I've never understood why we have to ask for our money, but we have to ask for our money. So that's the first one, and the second one is filing a modified tax budget. All that is being able to use the 5-year forecast instead of the old form of budget, which is interesting to say the least. So I would move that we request tax advances.
I would second.
And Dr. Swetchenow seconded. Any discussion? Mr. Giuffre, anything you need to tell us about that?
The history of it was that there were some school districts that received tax advances in a different fiscal year. And so this requirement is just to identify that it is for this fiscal year and that the fiscal years stay separate from the tax year because the tax year is a calendar year. Our fiscal year is not. That's the history.
And because they say we have to.
Yes. Whatever Mr. Rhodes says.
All right. Any questions? Mr. Giuffre, can we
Dr.
vote?
Lorenz,
Yes.
Dr. Schwetchenow,
Yes.
Ms. Washburn,
Yes.
Mr. Daugherty,
Yes.
Ms. Pettit.
Yes.
Motion carried.
Thank you.
As well it should. And then the next item is we need a motion to request to file a modified tax budget.
I'll move.
Ms. Pettit moved. Is there a second?
Second.
Dr. Swetchenow seconded. And as I mentioned, this is just being able to use the 5-year forecast format instead of the long form.
Continuity.
Questions? I will just mention at this point that the budget hearing will be prior to the January 4th organizational meeting. So we will start the organizational meeting at 6 as announced. The budget hearing will be at 5:35?
Yes.
No,
Probably 5:30.
5:30. All right. No questions? Mr. Giuffre, can we vote?
Ms. Pettit,
Yes.
Dr. Schwetchenow,
Yes.
Mrs. Washburn,
Yes.
Mr. Daugherty,
Yes.
and Dr. Lorenz.
Yes. Motion carried. And then we come to Ms. Pettit's favorite item.
I get to do it again.
You get to do it again.
I move, let's go home.
Move to adjourn. Ms. Pettit moves to adjourn, and I'll second that motion. Mr. Giuffre, can we vote on that?
Ms. Pettit,
Yes.
Dr. Lorenz.
Yes.
Mr. Daugherty,
Yes.
Dr. Schwetchenow,
Yes.
Washburn,
Yes.
and I think Mr. Daugherty still has the record.
Motion carried. Thank you very much. I hope you all have a happy break, happy holidays, healthy, drive home safely in the rain. And the meeting is adjourned at 4:24.
Very good.
Thank you all.